As we pass the village gate at the oving end of the village, the road we are travelling on is called Portway. This is a fairly common name in English villages and appropriately means gateway or doorway. Portway was very sparsely populated until the late 19th century, and old maps and aerial pictures show a small scattering of cottages, not unlike the one we are passing now. These would have been single-storey, timber-framed dwellings with an attic space under the thatch. The attic space would have been accessed using a ladder. The one we have just passed was built in the 1600s and was typical of many along the Granby Road and Quainton Road. I'm going to pull over here outside Winkfield House. This was built in the late 1800s and was one of the first in a building boom in North Marston that lasted 50 years from about 1860 to 1910. From this point, looking down the High Street, virtually every building in sight was built during the Victorian building boom. This unprecedented growth in housing and the village economy is owing to two factors, the railway and the telegraph, both of which connected North Marston to the wider world and enabled local produce to find its way to national or international markets. Bricks and slate imported by the railway changed the face of local architecture forever. If we cross the road, we can begin to see this part of the village was its commercial hub. One of the earliest established businesses was the blacksmith's forge, seen here in an early photograph. Forge was demolished many years ago and a bungalow is now built on its site. The blacksmith would have fixed broken pots and pans, made wrought iron fences and of course shoed horses. And next door to the forge, in the appropriately named Forge Cottage, stood baker's stores, run by two baker's sisters. This sold groceries, sweets and tobacco goods. In this picture we can see one of the sisters, Ida, standing by the gate. The shop frontage has been preserved. If we look to the left of Forge Cottage, we see a very impressive building known as Shakespeare's House. This was both the home and headquarters of a village tailoring and drapery business set up by the entrepreneurial H.J. Holden. There was a shop to the side facing the High Street, which we can see in this old picture. In the summer months, awnings would protect the south-facing shop windows from the sun. Holden's was an upmarket tailoring business which specialised in hunting wear, and he included royalty amongst his customers. Holden's was the village's biggest employer and, like other commercial businesses at the time, gained enormously from the effect of the railway and the telegraph. If we walk to the other end of Shakespeare House and look across, we can see the last surviving pub in the village, the Pilgrim. For centuries, it was known as the Bell. Here is a picture of the Bell in the early years of the 20th century. When this picture was taken, the pub was run by Mrs. Garner and her husband James, who was also the village bootmaker, and had a small shop adjoining the pub. But in order to make ends meet, James Garner also provided a gig service, a bit like a luxury car service today. Here is one of his adverts. Opposite the pub and side on to the road stands Marston House, one of the grandest village houses built during the Victorian period. In this picture we can see a Miss Tatham in all her finery seated to the left. Miss Tatham was the wealthy owner of many village properties. This is the Red House. It was built in the 1880s and from the early 1890s was used as the schoolhouse where the master and mistress of the village school were offered accommodation. This picture, taken in 1902, shows Sarah Pyle, wife of the head teacher Thomas Pyle. Garfield House was the village police house from the 1880s until the 1960s. In those days, the Bucks County Constabulary stationed a police constable and his family in every village. In this picture, taken in the early years of the 20th century, you can see the constable standing at the gate. The constables and their families were moved between villages every couple of years to prevent them going native and losing their authority. With the advent of the Thames Valley Police, village constables became a thing of the past. And here, of course, is the village hall, or to be more precise, the Memorial Hall. The building was paid for by public subscription to commemorate the loss of 22 young men from the village in the Great War. It was officially opened in 1924, and this picture shows the planting of the iconic chestnut tree that stands just outside the gates to the Memorial Hall grounds. There were numerous small cottages here along the Granbury Road, all now gone or subsumed within later development. Some of them, like this single-storey thatched cottage, were homes to lace makers. In this picture they are demonstrating their craft outside the cottage on what appears to be a very windy day.